Good morning. Welcome to the daily cyber briefing for Friday, the 27th of June. I'm Stephen Ridgway. Okay, a couple of patches to be aware of. Open VSX Marketplace has a flaw that enables millions of developers in fact, it puts millions of developers at risk of supply chain attacks. So, just to set the scene a little bit, the Open VSX Marketplace is an open source marketplace for Visual Studio Code. So Microsoft is strict on what you can get through in the way of Visual Studio Code through Microsoft. So there is a well-used open source, effectively, store of this stuff. The risk here is that when installing Visual Studio Code from OpenVSX, the OpenVSX components have the ability to modify files that go beyond what you would expect. So you're not necessarily restricted to changes to the code that you think that you're implementing. The solution to this, as with many things, is well, firstly, be certain you know what it is that you're trying to install from any of these third-party stores, be they app stores, code stores, marketplaces, whatever these things may be. Also, keep everything up to date. So it's specifically a flaw in the GitHub Actions if you want to get sort of deeper into it. So yeah, make sure that you're keeping stuff up to date. Be aware of this if you're using Visual Studio and you are getting code from the OpenVSX registry. It's worth having a read of this article, worth making sure that you understand the risks and you have mitigated them. Cisco has fixed two critical flaws in its identity services engine, its ICE engine. The flaws are tracked as CVE 2025 20218 and 2025 202. Did I say that wrong? I think I said that wrong. 2025 20281 and 2025 20282. They have both been assigned CVSS scores of 10 out of 10. Although arguably, if you use a different CVSS score version, you might end up with 9.8. Do you know what? That's splitting hairs. These are pretty serious stuff. It allows attackers to execute code on the underlying OS as root. Patches are available, so if you are using ICE, would very much recommend that you apply the patches as soon as is possible. Not aware of there being any other workarounds at the moment, or no sustainable workarounds for this. So patching is what is required. And then finally from me for today, and finally from me for this week, there is a very interesting article that I came across, written by a researcher, a Czech researcher, Miloslav Homer. It talks about dependency risks. It specifically is calling out Microsoft and Microsoft cloud services for dependency risks. The key to it is that Homer spotted that Microsoft suspended a specific user's Office 365 accounts um, on the off the back of requests from, I believe, US government. Now, so you could argue that, well, oh, come on, guys, these things are, being able to disable criminal accounts and whatever, blah blah blah, is quite a good thing. Well, the person that whose account was suspended, is associated with the International Criminal Court. Now, you can argue whether the International Criminal Court is in fact a court full of international criminals or not. And you can probably guess where I stand on that one. I don't think it's particularly. I think it's moved way beyond its usefulness. However, that's politics, and that isn't what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is the fact that I don't think any of us properly risk assess what would happen if our cloud providers, for whatever reason, be it their own internal policy or pressure from government, pressure from law enforcement, they can pull the plug on pretty much everything you do. If you're a cloud first organization, the existence of your business is 100% dependent on compliance of your providers. Just look at it this way: if you use Microsoft 365, you use compute and you store data in Azure, blah blah blah, and Microsoft comes along going, "Oh, okay, you are now persona non grata. We've just turned it all off." What would you do? Now, if you go back to when I was doing much more of this stuff hands on, 10, 20 years ago, maybe, almost nothing was run in the cloud because, quite rightly, at the time, security teams were arguing, well, the cloud puts your data, and it puts your data in the hands of people that you don't know and you can't risk assess properly. You don't know what happens to anything that goes out there. Well, that's very interesting. I think the simplicity of and the flexibility of running things in the cloud has overtaken the very genuine, very legitimate security risks that were being raised at that point where these things were being discussed. At that time, most organizations would run their services off servers that they owned. They could go and point at their servers. The servers might have been, they might have been in a broom cupboard, which is at the end, like the end of the scale of, well, that's not going to go very well in a disaster, is it? Right the way through to when I was working in financial services, all things, including the office environment stuff, was all run out of dedicated, caged, secure sections of data centers. And it's sort of in between, which most people ended up with, was the colo stuff. So you might have a particular rack, but your rack would be in amongst lots of other people's racks. It would be pretty difficult for Microsoft to shut that down. They might prevent you from getting further updates. They might do stuff to that would mean cause you problems, but it wouldn't switch it off overnight. They couldn't go, oh, okay, we decided we don't like you anymore. You can't have access to your stuff anymore, because it was on your servers. Your servers would continue running. Regardless of whatever Microsoft did, pretty much. Now, I'm calling out Microsoft because Microsoft is still the biggest provider of services, to the best of my knowledge, across the board. Although you could argue that in specific sectors like mobile devices, Apple and Android, Apple and Google are, equally enormous. But in fact, they're much bigger than Microsoft in that space. So, so the argument is the same. What if Apple closed down your account? What if Google shut down your ability to access stuff in Android? It would be pretty terminal, and Office 365 and Azure are not the only collaboration tools. The only cloud suites out there. Google Suite is also very, very common, and there are others. Depending, there are more niche things floating around out there too. But these companies are not completely immune from political interference, especially in the US. They're US-based companies. And as we've seen, the current US government takes a particularly strong line with organisations and individuals that disagree with it. Again, without getting too deep into the politics, it just means that there is a risk, it is a non-zero risk that Microsoft might decide they don't like your organization, or that Google might decide they don't like your organization anymore and would prevent access. So just imagine if you use G Suite and you've got all your data in, on Google Drive. All your appointments are, and your contacts are all in Google Calendar. Your emails are all in Gmail, and then all of a sudden you go to log in the morning and it's not there. What do any of us think? I suspect there will be organisations out there. I imagine the guys from the financial services organisation I used to work for, having already come up with a solution that involves ridiculously expensive storage and keeping a copy of everything somewhere, that makes it possible to restore and regain access to things, even if cloud providers, service providers, switch it all off. So there will be organisations out there that have mitigated this, but I'm willing to bet that the majority of SMEs have not thought about this risk, and I'm willing to bet that the majority of medium to large enterprises are not strong in this arena. How many times have you sat in a BCP scenario where the disaster recovery part of BCP has been along the lines of, it's okay, it's in the cloud, so it's resilient, therefore, well, you might lose this, but you won't lose access to stuff because it's all in the cloud. Yeah, let's think about it. It's a really interesting article. I'm not totally convinced with everything that Homer has put in the article, but it is a very, very good example. It is very good examples of where the risks might lie. I personally question some of his calculations around return on security investment. He clearly a highly intelligent guy, clearly does understand what he's presenting. I just think that some of it is based on assumptions. They're not the assumptions that I would start with, but that's just my personal opinion, and I've got the total kudos to the guy for coming up with this. We need to be talking about this stuff. We need to be thinking about it right now. So the takeaway from this one is, think about what you would do if your cloud provider decided they didn't like you anymore. Right, that's all from me for today. I hope you have a good Friday and a good end of the week. Enjoy your weekend. I'll speak to you on Monday. I'm traveling Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday next week. So with a bit of luck, we can organise it that Rich Benfield, Uncle Rich from the Cyber Agony Uncles, will hopefully be able to stand in. However, if there are gaps in transmission next week, you know why. Right, great. Have a good weekend, and I'll speak to you.